دي محاضراتنا لهذا اليوم. المحاضرة الأولى للدكتورة أمنة فاضل Focus on Keratoconus Grading System.
Assalamu alaikum everybody. Inshallah our lecture for today gonna be about focus on keratoconus grading. First of all, I want to tell you something. After the good morning with Assalamu alaikum, since we are few in number, you can all gather here to be more familiar with each other and to hear it more clearly. To start with, cornea has a dome-shape-like structure. So corneas are really domes, and cones are pathological conditions related to the domes. So we have cones and domes. And domes are, as you know, qubbatun wa qibab. So we have corneal cones and domes. And this is not working. It's okay. I'll manage it here. Yeah. So as we said, we have cones and domes, وقباب, وقبة وقباب, of course, وقباب Baghdad. And these are the corneal domes. قباب Baghdad. This is my beautiful city, the golden domes, and this is Widad al-Orfali with her beautiful domes of Baghdad. And على هامش lecture وهامش gathering of ourselves, and I'm so happy to meet you all together. I wrote something just, يعني, if we have the time. I have some. Anybody can help? جماعة Yeah, it's not. Does this is up? حتى الراتب. It's not. Okay, I'll do it بالمانيوال. ما شغل. لا تغيرت هنا الأشياء. It's okay. خليها أرجع. بس على أخليها بال.
بس دوسي هاي فوق next.
بس next. Okay. So, thanks. It's okay. Thanks, Amu. Okay. So we were in something had changed here. It's okay. We are still in Qibab Baghdad. So this is for you and for Qibab Baghdad. This lecture, small lecture, it's really dedicated to Baghdad wa Qibab Baghdad. By the way, we all know that cones are in the reddish spectrum of the tomography, but here our qibab are in the bluish spectrum. So to qibab Baghdad, وقبابك الزرق وقبابك الزرق وقبابك الزرق الطهور كأنها أحداق صوفي يبث إلى السماء، ولأنك الصبر الجميل على الأذى بشرت يا مكنونة العشق بما الآية وبشر الصابرين وبشر الصابرين وبشر الصابرين بما راعهم نحن وإياك على الوعد كما يوعد زهر الصبح وصل الندى والصبح شبيه قد صلى عليك وسلم. So now we finished with domes and qibabs. We will shift to our lecture, the grading and classification of keratoconus in general. Really what I want to tell you in this small limited time lecture, why do we care about the grading in every disease, not just in keratoconus? The grading, it's all about gathering and summarizing the disease, all in simple and simplified symbols so that we can make a roadmap for the disease in general, to confirm it, and to have a plan for management and for treatment. That's why we care about the gradings and classification for every disease. And in keratoconus, really, what I want to tell you that the grading of keratoconus, when it started, first it started just as a clinical aspect. It was just a clinical description of the keratoconus, and then things were evolving. After the invention and creation of the tomography and topography, we could use the indices and the maps of the topography and tomography to aid us in the classification and grading systems. And then we had, through these tomography systems, special keratoconus indices. Indeed, I want also to tell you a small message that, dear people, every topography and tomography system has its own keratoconus indices. So it's good to teach ourselves to look to these indices, keratoconus indices, and to follow them sometimes if it will be helpful. And also through the classification and grading systems, these are the ways we classify. Also, there are combinations of some of the above. Could be clinical, and could be some of the topo and some of the keratoconus indices. So this is in general the idea of the classification. How the history of keratoconus grading. Really, I chose to tell you about the history of grading to honor the people who made the classification systems. I think they deserve we mention their names in this meeting. First of all, of course, all of you have heard of the Amsler classification. The first established classification for the keratoconus, it was by the Mark Amsler in 1950. So it's about 70 years ago. He did the first classification, the most established classification system for the keratoconus. It was mostly clinically based. It predated the invention of the topo and tomography. So it just took in consideration the clinical aspects, which is the central corneal radius, of course the anterior surface of cornea, and best visual acuity, and the corneal thickness and the transparency. It has 0 to 4 stages, considering the 0 stage as normal, and then grades of the disease. And then Mackenhern added something to this classification. Here still we are in the aspect of a clinical grading, clinical classification. Mackenhern added something which is the corneal eccentricity, or the cone eccentricity, added to that classification. So they are always adding to the first Amsler classification. That's why always in the text or even in the studies we see the Amsler classification as a cornerstone, which is something we have to remember always. And then there is a Krumike. Krumike, he added something also. He added the induced myopia or astigmatic error to the non-classification. So they are always gathering and adding things, and still we are in the zone of a clinical classification. Then the step came. 30 years ago, Wilson and Kleiss considered topography and tomography in clinical and keratoconus diagnosis. So this was the first step regarding the topo and tomography, and it had, of course, a revolution in the classification systems and the grading systems. Then others, they came to bring some indices, some really creative indices from the topography and tomography analysis, just like Smolik and Kleiss and other people we will mention later. These indices, by the way, they are specific indices to the keratoconus, and they have cutoff values. So it's really something remarkable that they have values we can grade according to them. Okay. See the poetry always, I'm not going for it, but it comes for me. I'm putting the slides, it's here. A glance on the history, as we said, we mentioned it. Then we will talk in summary about, by the way, yeah. We have the Amsler-Krumike classification we talked about here, as we said. The Amsler has, as I told you, 4 stages. 0 stage is within normal, so it started as the stage 1. And as you see that it has the eccentric steepening and myopic error in the cornea, and starts with below the 5 diopter and then increasing if it's more than 5 diopters, reaching to the stage 3 in more than up to 8 to 10 diopters, and stage 4 is the last stage. And of course, the corneal thickness also it's decreasing with each stage, and the K readings. Okay. And here we have the modified chromic classification. Indeed, I don't want to go in much details about the classification. We just wanted to mention that these are mostly the clinical aspects of the grading systems. And also we have something called the CLEC. There are a lot, but I try to manage to bring the most important and the most famous ones. We have the CLEC scale for corneal scarring grading. The CLEC, it stands for Collaborative Longitudinal Valuation of Keratoconus. So here, still we are in the zone of a clinical classification. It classifies the cornea, the cone, according to the haze or the scarring in the cornea into 1, 2, 3, 4 stages. Stage 1 starting from the diameter of the scar or the haze less than 1.5, and then with each step there is increment of 0.5 millimeter, reaching to the 4th stage, which is the opaque or on-line off-site size more than 2.5 millimeters. See, all this, we are still in the clinical classification. Also, we have the classification or the grading based on the severity of the curvature, i.e. just the K. So we can always have classification systems by themselves separately or gathered together. Here we have the mild, moderate and severe and advanced, starting from less than 45 to 52. I think this is the most clinical we use. We are always, we are all maybe familiar with the Ks and with the indication of the Ks in the keratoconus. Really, I think we are not following a specific grading system, but we are following a lot of things which are not false, which are all true, but not a specific grading system. We are so much, I think, all of us familiar with the K gradings. And here this picture, just to show you that this is a pentacam for maps. Here the era of the topography and tomography has merged, and then we are much more familiar with the analysis of the tomography. The 4 maps, the famous 4 maps, the curvature map and the elevation map, thickness map, and each map of the tomography analysis has also its own indices of keratoconus indices, which are helpful in the grading systems. Then, this is a sample also of the index-based classification. Keratoconus indices, the specific indices. The most famous people who made these indices, and it has been named after them, to honor them, of course. Rabinovich, we are all familiar with the Rabinovich value and the Rabinovich ratio, inferior-superior value. It's belonging to Rabinovich. And also the Smolik and Kleis, the KCI, KSI. You will learn these terms, and then after 5 minutes you will forget them. That's why don't bother about them. It's Keratoconus Classification Index, Keratoconus Severity Index, and these things. Also there are other people, Rabinovich and Rashid, McMahon et al., and other people. So this is just a sample to show you that we have specific keratoconus indices based classification. And as I mentioned, I want really to remind you always, each machine, topography and tomography machine, has its own keratoconus indices. It's nice if we have a look on them. Anyway, now I want to talk to you about something new. It's not that much new, but it's the most recent one, and a lot of talk has been done and has been talked about this subject. A new classification system. We are here in the era of the tomography analysis. We left the era of the clinical. We didn't leave it fully, but we are getting information more from the tomography analysis and studies. Here we have something which I think you will see a lot in the studies and in the other conferences. They will talk a lot about Bellin ABCD classification. Bellin ABCD classification is a classification and grading system to keratoconus. It's also based on the tomography analysis, but it has something new. it did something new and creative in the same time. Bellin, he considered the first one who considered the posterior corneal surface in the classification system and in the grading systems. And also, he measured the radius of curvature and the thinnest, he mentioned the radius of curvature regarding the thinnest point as opposed to apical point. And the thickness, of course. Yani we were always checking for the radius of curvature and the corneal thickness in the previous classification and grading systems according to the corneal apex. Here, Bellin did something new. He considered the thinnest point of the cone as the central point. This has a nice and remarkable application. So he is really getting more with the cone itself, with the pathology itself, being that our new measurements are centered on the thinnest point in the cone. So this is something nice about Bellin classification, apart of course from the posterior consideration of the surface of the cornea. And also here we have what is new. This is the revolution in Bellin classification, which we should be familiar with, all of us. He created something, you all know that in the elevation maps, if I get back to the slides, no, I'm getting forward. Here, we have the elevation maps. As you all know, the reference surface in the elevation maps, in the elevation study, we have the term standard reference surface, which could be either standard best fit sphere or best fit toric ellipsoid, whatever it is, but it is our best fit reference surface. Bellin has brought something new. The best reference surface, which we are all familiar with, it takes 8 millimeter zone from the cornea, trying to have a surface which is best fitting the cornea as a whole, whether it's diseased, whether it's normal, and this best fit surface, it's taking the averages of these points on the cornea and trying to get approximate or maximal best fitting surface as it's named, which could be either spherical or toric. Bellin did something so much creative, which is he took something called the enhanced reference surface. He's taking the 8 millimeter, same diameter of the previous reference surface, but here he excluded the central, pay attention to this is the point, he excluded the central 4 millimeters of the cornea, which is mostly the diseased cornea, the area of the thinning. So trying to do what? Trying to exclude the abnormal area of the cornea, trying to exclude the cone and not to put it in the averaging points. So anything above this enhanced reference surface will be accentuated and will be so much easily to catch as abnormal, whether it's keratoconus or any type of ectasia. So really this was the most important revolution in the Bellin classification and grading. And here in that picture there, you can see that in the normal cornea, the enhanced reference surface and the best fit surface, they are almost the same because we have normal cornea. But in the diseased status, which is the ectatic cornea, the enhanced reference surface would catch and would be so much sensitive to catch the cone or the ectatic area so much earlier. And as you know, it's all about the early detection of keratoconus or any ectatic problem. This is all about. So we have to, I think, to love Bellin and his classification from now on and to be a little bit familiar with as much as possible. This is something regarding the Bellin ABCD system. We will talk about it. We talked about the most important point in Bellin classification, and then what does the ABCD stand for? Sometimes it's just mentioned ABCD classification without Bellin, but we know that it belongs to him, to Bellin. A is the anterior corneal curvature, the radius of curvature of the anterior surface, and B stands for the radius of curvature of the posterior surface. We mentioned this is his point. He considered he was the first one to consider the posterior surface. And C is the corneal thickness. D is the distance best corrected visual acuity. So he's still here. He put something from the clinical aspects. He's having consideration to the best corrected visual acuity and also the tomography-based analyses. And here, the stages of the Bellin ABCD classification, 0, 1, 2, 4. So there are 5 stages. The AB, more details about the AB, the curvature, the radius of curvature, it's regarding the central 3 millimeters of the cornea. And maybe there is a more clearer picture. It's not that much clearer, but it states the words I told you. This is the ABCD classification as it's shown in the printout. It will be shown like this, A, B, C, D, and each parameter has its own number. And by the way, these numbers, suppose we have guides for these numbers to know in which area of the grades of the classification we are. So totally, collectively, it will be mentioned like this, A0, for example, B4, C3, and such and such, okay? So this is about the Bellin classification, and we have something else. See what? When bad turns into good. Bellin, he did the ABCD classification system, and then we have something new, something else, a new term, which is the bad. The bad, we will love the bad from now on because it will turn into good, as I mentioned. We have the Bellin-Ambrosio display, or what is called the Bellin-Ambrosio enhanced ectasia display. So it is abbreviated as BAD. The BAD is really, it's just a summarization to what we've talked and what we've mentioned for the Bellin system, and it's a printout to show us all the parameters we talked about. For example, this is the elevation maps, and these are the elevation maps using the best fit surface, the standard best fit surface, and then for the same patient, of course, this is a printout, and then showing the elevation maps with the new invented enhanced reference surface. See, for example, here in this case, how it is more clearly the area of the abnormality, the area of the cone, or the area of the ectasia indeed. For example, it's more accentuated than the upper picture. This is the advantage of using the enhanced reference surface of Bellin. And this is the subtraction, of course, the difference between the standard reference surface and the enhanced reference surface. And then through the body classification, body grading systems, we are summarizing, we are having more summarizations which are helping us to grade the keratoconus. Finally, they will mention D, which has also number or figure to tell us in which area of the grades we are. And what else?
Time, Doctor.
Time, yeah, I think I finished almost. Also, this is a new picture. And this is a point not related to the keratoconus. I just wanted to tell you something new. Maybe you will love it. There is a talk in the horizon that we will enter in the era of the molecular genetic test. It is mentioned that maybe someday in the future, near future, people of the imagination will do this job. They are having a Schirmer-like test, putting your patient on the slit lamp, and just testing a special gene, which is aquaporin 5 gene. When you find that it is depressed, so this is an early keratoconus, as simple as such, and you will have all the headache spared. And then, this is the message. Embrace the grace in every case and enjoy your career. Hopefully that you did not feel boring. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Amna, for this nice presentation. Our next speaker, Dr. Diyar Jafar, one way to optimize corneal cross-linking.